So today I'm going to be taking a look at a Glashütte, specifically the Panomatic Lunar. It has been a watch on my want list for quite a while and on kind of like my wish list. You know, it is not a watch I expected to end up with, but I'm glad I did. I want to say a quick shout out to Feldmar Watches in Los Angeles. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, but I had a great experience. Jimmy in particular was the person who helped me. Very, very kind, very, very willing to work with me, and I'm glad I was able to get this watch on my wrist. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we have a diameter of 40 millimeters, lug to lug of 47.2, height of 12.7, and we have a lug width of 20 millimeters. Some other general specifications for this watch we're going to have inside being the caliber 9002. As you can see, it's kind of like a micro rotor slash just a 3/4 rotor. Also have quoted 50 meters of water resistance, but no screw down crown. We have a 42-hour power reserve. It beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour. And lastly, we do have a slightly domed sapphire on the front and a sapphire on the back. It also has a retail price of about $9,900 with the deployant and $9,600 with just a regular tang buckle. So moving into the dial, and this is going to be the reason you are buying this watch. It has hands down the best green dial that I've ever seen. Of course, I haven't seen every green dial that's ever existed, but this one is quite stunning, quite just eye-catching, really. It has this kind of, if you have it at a distance, you can see the left portion of the watch, really all the thing that tells the time, has a very kind of bright sunburst green appearance most times, and the rest of it gives off this very black, maybe slash forest green kind of look. And just when you hit the light right, it just pops out that green. The kind of very extremity always stays pretty dark, but you can just see the nice color play that goes on at different angles, just the way the dial really comes to life. It has a beautiful, beautiful effect. It is somewhat hard to just communicate, but it's subtle at times, it's very in your face at times, but it's always beautiful. Moving more generally into the dial though, we can see we have this classic kind of what has been come to known as a Germanic type layout. We have a big date window, we have a moon phase, we have the time telling and sub-seconds shifted off to the left-hand side. In the regular time telling area, we have just regular batons all around, a double baton at 12. We have some nice kind of like sword-ish style hands. I'm pretty sure they're not called swords, but I'll put the correct term down in the description. We have this really nice sub-seconds track with this really just nice counterbalance. I really like the shape of it. And just one thing I would like to note about the design of these two intersecting subdials, I just love the way they kept the sub-seconds track going from the top into the bottom dial with no interruption. I think it's a really clean look. It keeps the like circular nature of that subdial intact, and I think it's just a really nice design. We also have this kind of nice moon phase cut out over here with polished stars and a actual silver moon. Pretty nicely done there. Again, we have the big date window, which is nicely stepped down. You can see there is a fairly decent amount of text on the dial, I would say. I don't know how much I love this kind of text around the outside edge. I don't think it needs to say moon phase up here for us to know it's a moon phase, but most likely it's something that's fitting still within the golden ratio. So I've never really worn the watch and thought, I don't wish that text was there. I don't think they've put too much text on the dial by any means, and overall I just do think it's a really well executed dial. It looks really nice. It definitely is just unique. You don't see a lot of dials with this layout, nonetheless for the sub 10 grand price point. So it really is just beautiful, it's unique, and it just looks different than any other thing that you can find on the market. Zooming into this lovely dial, we can see how detailed it actually is. This middle portion has all these nice concentric circles around it. The one thing I will note is you can see there is this kind of like bubbling along the entirety of the texture. I think that personally is a consequence of the coating processes. I don't think it's necessarily a defect. Does it look a little bit less, I guess, premium because of this bubbling? Maybe, but I think at this magnification is the only time you really do see it, and on wrist, all you really see is the beautiful just nature of the dial and the color temperatures shine through. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. As we can see there, the hands are really finely polished. I don't think I really even see any imperfections. There might be a slight speck near that base hand stack, but yeah, other than that, just pretty well done. I love the shape of them, just they're so angular. And again, more concentric circling in this sub-second style. Nicely done hand there. And I think at this magnification, you can really tell how just dark that edge of the dial is. It does stay very, very dark. Even when there's a lot of light on it, you can see there is still like a darkish, blackish edge to the very, very extremity of the dial. And it just is really, really nice in person. You definitely have to see it for yourself. I'm hoping the video does it some justice, but you never know. As you can see, very, very thick numerals and printing for that big date there. I do kind of like how the kind of texturing of the ink on the numerals actually just almost mirror that of the texturing on the dial. Just kind of nice. And if we're just taking a quick look at all the text done here, I think you can kind of just tell it's all done very, very crisply. We can actually see there is like depth to the actual numerals. They aren't flatly printed on, or rather the letters, but you can see that there's actually good attention to detail paid. They're printed on, they have a thick quality to them. It adds dimensionality to the dial overall, and it's just really, really nice. And as we can see there, black polish on that moon. Nice little stars. I really do like the stars. It just adds a little bit of fun to otherwise a kind of sterile and very serious watch, but I think the green adds fun to it either way. You can see there is a really dynamic nature to how this green can really just change and morph, going from a very dark black to an almost emerald shiny, just, you know, almost foresty green. Just, yeah, that is a good dial. And then one thing I just like to note is how detailed this cutout for the moon is. You can see there is kind of like slight angling on the entirety of the edge there. There is this kind of like cut down section around the border of it. You can just tell there was attention paid to this watch. It is undoubtedly a watch of a higher quality. It is something where the kind of watchmakers and dial makers and whatnot actually just poured their heart and soul into this piece. So moving on to the case of this watch, and I think Glashütte just basically took the path of just being very, very simple with the case. I do think this case is kind of pretty common within their just general model lines, but overall it's a very simply done case. We can see we have this kind of two-sectioned bezel. We have this kind of smaller portion right here at the edge, followed by this thicker portion. They are both polished. I think the double nature of the bezel just kind of adds a little bit more visual flair to the kind of bezel area. We can see basically all brushing on the top, a little kind of chamfer along the edge of the case here, horizontal brushing on the sides. We have a nice signed Glashütte crown. That is the moon phase pusher there. Again, open case back. We'll zoom on that in a bit. But yeah, I mean, it is just a very simply done watch. I think mainly it is just meant to not detract from the dial itself. The dial is undoubtedly the star of the show here, and I think the case is just a complement to the dial, not meant to stand out, not meant to be too crazy in any way. I do think they could have gone for a more aggressive case shape just to kind of match the coolness of the dial layout, but you know, there's a little bit more restraint involved in the case design. And then as you can see there, the watch isn't necessarily the thickest of all watches, but honestly it does wear really well on the wrist. I've never at any point was wearing it and thought, wow, this is a thick watch. So it does wear well. There is a lot of curvature down in those lugs there. And I do like the case, albeit it's a little simple. And before we move on to the case back, I just wanted to note the crown looks very well sized in my opinion. It looks proportional to the watch. The winding experience is very, very nice on the watch. I love the way it feels. Probably one of the best winding experiences I've ever had on a watch. And it just feels nice, feels smooth, a nice just audible click and feedback to it. So that's really nice there. And one thing I will want to say is if we just look in here about how the date window changes over. Oh, those are the hands. If we look about how the date window switches over, it just has this very audible click. I'll bring it next to the microphone. It has this very audible click. It just feels good. It feels sturdy. When it actually transitions from midnight, it just is a very prominent, you know, purposeful click over. And I just love the way it looks, loves the way it feels. And It's just one of those little details that makes you feel like you have a quality watch. So cool. So getting nice and close in here with this beautifully, beautifully finished movement, we can see we have just some very, very defined striping all throughout. I do really like this kind of, I don't even know what to call that texture. It's almost like a knurling-ish pattern in this kind of groove for the rotor there. As you can see, all the kind of text is inlaid with gold. We have actually, where does it say it? 21 karat gold on the rotor there. As you can see, all the text is just done really, really nicely. 47 jewels. Beautiful, beautiful detail to that hand engraved balance bridge. I mean, undoubtedly, when you're spending this kind of money, it's not necessarily about the money you're spending. It's about the artistry, about the just beauty of the watch, about if it speaks to you and if it looks just gorgeous inside and out. And this watch definitely does that. This is probably the best movement I've ever seen in person. It is lovely to look at. It's just a joy to see, and yeah, it is just gorgeous. Moving on to how the watch wears. Earlier I was wearing my Anordain. I thought you might as well keep that Fume style theme going, and I believe I wore the Glashütte in the Anordain video, so you know, gotta keep some continuity going, I guess. So there we have the Glashütte on my 6.5 inch wrist. And I will say, I mean, it has a fairly constrained lug-to-lug distance, so I think it wears pretty well within the bounds. Originally, kind of one of my dream watches was the Lengenzone, obviously, very similar style to this watch. I forget the model reference, it's either the Lang 1, I believe it's called the Lang 1. Anyway, that was one of my kind of dream watches for a long time, but I feel like over time I realized I'm not really a Roman numeral guy, and that has Roman numerals. But the thing I did like about the Lang in comparison to this is I believe it had a 38.5mm case, while this one has a 40. And over my watch collecting journey I found, yeah, I like smaller cases, and I thought this would be too big. But honestly, after wearing it, it fits really, really well on the wrist. I think it just looks great. I don't think it looks oversized by any means. It does conform pretty well, so I haven't had any problems slipping it under a dress cuff or anything like that. And I just do like how the watch wears. As you can see on the wrist there, you do have that lug turn down, which helps it wear closer to the wrist. I don't think it's perfectly done because the lugs are kind of high in comparison to the case bottom, but it does help it wear. It doesn't make it, you know, slab-sided by any means, and it just looks nice. It feels good on the wrist, and definitely no complaints while wearing this watch. And before I tried on some other straps, just to note, this is a collarette based strap. I forget exactly which one it is, but it's like a wood grain vegan strap. It has a really, really nice texture to it, all these kind of like small squares. I just put it on this because I don't love the original strap. The original strap is very, very nicely done. It has this very nice matte brown chocolate tone to it, suede alligator. But for me, I'm not really just big into like these darker brown chocolate tones. It's just my taste, but it is well done. It is a comfortable strap. It has a very, very nice deployant that actually is signed very well, polished very well. But honestly, the strap just isn't my style, but it is gorgeous. Here we have another strap from Collareb in this kind of like sandy-ish, beigeish, brownish. I really do like this combination. I don't remember the exact name of this strap type, but I will add it just on the screen. And I think the green dial just works really well, like browns and kind of like more grays and neutral colors. But yeah, let's get it on the wrist. Looks really good with the suede, adds a little bit of more texture to the watch. And yeah, I just really like this combo as well. Other than the wood collareb I showed earlier, this one is probably my other favorite combo. This nice kind of gray with these like black just kind of shining through. I believe it's kind of like a wax top, so as you can see, the more wear you get, the more kind of like the grayish black shines through. I think it just works really well with kind of like the Fume style effect of the dial, and I just like the gray and green combo. We have it on wrist. Really nice combo in my opinion, very, very casual. Looks great. And it wouldn't be my channel if I didn't put a 5-figure watch on a silicone strap. And I do really like this combo, it makes it a little bit more casual. One thing I will note is I don't think the white perfectly matches the white of that kind of date window. I think this leans more silver, but overall it's not that big of a deal. Again, this is a silicone from Archer straps. Helps the watch wear really, really comfortably, and a fun combo for those summer months or hotter days, or just if you want to have a nice pop of color. So overall, the Lume is pretty sparsely done, not very bright. It's only on the hands. Not a horrible application, but again, you're not really going to be reading anything in the dark with this kind of level of lumage. And then comparing it to the Timex really quick, the color temperatures aren't too different, but again, not really going to be reading this in the dark. So pros and cons of the watch, and I think one of the biggest pros is just going to be the dial. The color is amazing, the kind of dégradé effect is awesome. The layout of it is also just really unique, it's really pleasing, it's really just a breath of fresh air in a collection because you just are so used to maybe chronographs or three-handers, and seeing this kind of moon phase with the big date with the time telling off to the left is really, really nice. And I think the dial is just really cool. I like it personally, and I think it's a big pro to the watch. Another big pro I think will just be the design overall. It again is unique, it is Germanic, it is interesting, it is cool. So I think the design itself is just a really, really nice aspect of the watch. And just the quality of it is there, the quality in the dial, the quality in the movement finishing, the design of the movement itself, that 3/4 plate, the micro rotor. It's all just there, it's all really nice, and it's a cool watch to look at both front and back. And last but not least, I think this watch has a kind of a cool factor. It is off the beaten path of what a collector would normally look at, I guess. When you're talking about spending close to $10,000 on a watch, and even if we're talking about used prices, $8,000, $7,000, $6,000, most people are saying, you know, look at Rolex, look at Omegas, look at, you know, like maybe a used Blancpain, or maybe even like a JLC. It's just, Glashütte is not one of those brands that come to the forefront of people's minds. And I think that's just kind of cool. It's a niche within a niche, really. It is a watch that I think offers a lot of value. It offers a lot of enjoyment. Now moving on to cons, because of course there are going to be some. And I think one of the interesting cons would be, is a moon phase big date watch useful? I don't think so. This is definitely kind of almost a pure aesthetic driven watch. It is a watch you're getting because you like the look of it, you think it's beautifully made, you think the dial color is amazing, the layout's amazing, and it looks unique. There's really no use to have a moon phase, but it's romantic, it looks nice, and it's executed well here. So it's one of those things where it's not the most useful of complications. The chronograph, even if people don't use it very often, is more useful than this would be. But that can be considered a con because you are paying extra in both upfront costs and potential long-term servicing costs for what is a more complicated movement. One of my more actual cons for the watch would be the fact that I think it needs a better AR coating. I couldn't find what type of AR coating they use, if it's under or if it's over, how many layers, whatnot. But I think with the fact that there's so much color changing happening in the dial, there's so much color depth, and a lot of it comes from when you tilt it off axis or you see it at a slight angle. So I think the fact that so much of the beauty in the watch comes from seeing it at those different angles in brighter lighting situations, things like that, I think a better AR coating would allow you to enjoy the dial a little bit more. And kind of along that point of things that aren't necessarily too bad on the watch, but I think I wish were better executed, would be the hour markers. They are kind of almost always in this state of like general brightness. They always look like they're reflecting a lot of light in a way, and they don't have that characteristic kind of like black polish look to them. And as you can see, if you go into like the photo of the dial, or I think of like the macro footage might show it a little bit better, but you can see that the hands themselves go from like a classic grayish silver when it's like under direct light, but when the light's kind of hitting it at a different angle, they go blackish or darkish. But the hour markers don't react in the same way, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because they are polished differently, if it's because of the surface area, because it's treated in some way. I don't know what the reasoning is behind that, but I think it would be slightly better if it had that characteristic black turning nature, that black polish effect to them. The more minor gripes would just be the rotor is sometimes able to be heard. I didn't notice it very often, but if I had my hand closer to my kind of ear, if I was like kind of, you know, resting my hand or something like that, you would hear the occasional rotor movement. It's not super annoying by any means, and honestly, kind of like when the rotor moved, it just made me think, let me take off the watch and look at that rotor. So there are benefits and drawbacks, I guess. And really that's it for the cons. There isn't really that much I've had problems with in terms of just owning the watch or just the design in general. It is a watch I didn't expect to like as much as I did. It isn't a watch I expected to buy. It isn't a watch I expected to fit as well as it did. But at almost every turn, I was pleasantly surprised by this watch. I enjoyed it the more time I spent with it. It is a beautiful watch, and it is a unique watch, and I think it does like stand out in a collection or stand out in a watch box or stand out in a watch group meetup. It just is a watch that almost makes itself known. It is beautiful. It is awesome. Kind of my final thoughts is, if you've been considering this Glashütte or a Panomatic in general, I think you should get one. It is a really, really cool watch. It does lean dressy, of course, but I don't think it is opposed to being used casually. I think it just is unique enough to where you can, you know, get away with just wearing it. And it is quite a bit of money at retail, and I do think kind of like the retail is justified. It is kind of more of a hand-finished product, but again, you can get pretty good discounts. You can go for used models, which are extremely well valued in the market. So I think you should just go for one. It is an awesome watch. I enjoyed my time with it. And yeah, it is a really nice one. So if you end up getting one, let me know. I hope you got something from the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another one.